Hey everyone, this is another live look at the astrology of March 29th to April 4th, 2021. My name is Katie Sweetman. I'm an astrologer here in Brooklyn, New York, and this is Empowering Astrology. And of course, you can follow me online at empoweringastrology.com. I know that we gather every week, and I really appreciate your support. And I know some of you are always in the chat during the live broadcast, but also want to say hello to those that are watching on the replay, whether it's YouTube, IGTV, listening on Spotify. But thank you again for joining me. We're going to sort of look at the astrology, not just for this week, but understand how the astrology is, as I say, 50%. You are the other 50%. We use astrology to understand what time it is. We understand sort of the subtle languages of life, but we use it to be our best self. There's an element of transformation and evolution and personal awareness and consciousness that goes in all of this. And this is why we need to understand that astrology is just energy. Like, we are the missing part of it. So this week we're coming off of a Libra full moon, so maybe you're feeling those full moon vibes. Full moons, they put things not only into the spotlight, and it's this time in our lunar calendar where it's about relationship, it's about partnership, it's about the realization that we can't do things alone. Now, here's the thing, it's Aries season. When we have a full moon, it's always in the sign that's opposite of where the sun is. And Aries season means that we are learning to be individuals, to take the lead, to move forward, to stand up for ourselves, and to find our courage and bravery. And that's something that we're actually going to be really exploring this week. But can't do things alone. Astrology is also about balance, and this is something that we really do learn very deeply in the sign of Libra. Libra does teach us about balance and how to put everything back into order so that life can flow. I'm sure you all know this. When you try to do things only on yourself, and then you're like, oh, why do I hurt so much? Why am I overburdened? Why is it too much? Because again, astrology teaches us that we need other people. So this full moon put your relationships in the spotlight, and maybe you saw some twists and turns. Maybe some deeper emotional material came up, and this is something that we'll go into more deeply in a moment, because this full moon activated the energies of Chiron. This week we are coming off of the full moon, and there's not a lot of, let's say, big aspects. We do have, Chiron in the mix. We have Mercury conjunct Neptune in the mix, but I want to also talk about how there's this interplay that's happening right now in the sky between the element air and the element fire. And as you may know, that air fuels fire. So when we go later into this week, Mercury will go into Aries on April 3rd, and we're going to get another shot of fire energy to kind of pick up with all this air energy. We have Saturn in Aquarius. Aquarius is an air sign, even though people forget that and think it's water. Mars is in Gemini, another air sign. Everything is sort of in Aries right now. It'll pile up coming up in Aries. So again, my name is Katie Sweetman. I'm an astrologer here in Brooklyn, New York, and you can again follow me online at Empowering Astrology. I see some familiar faces in the chat. So let's talk about this Libra full moon and how it plays into Chiron. So we had a Libra full moon just yesterday as I record this, March 28th. It was at 8 degrees of Libra. Well, at the other end of things was Venus. Venus is in Aries right now. This is a Libra full moon, but it's also about really standing up for ourselves. We can be in relationship, but we can't lose ourselves in relationship. We need the partner, we need the individualisticness, we need the stand up for ourselves, to really know our conviction and to be brave and be courageous. Because sometimes, again, when you're in relationship, it's more about what the other person wants, and then we forget, well, what is it that we want? So there's this dynamic energy that's happening right now. Even though the full moon was yesterday, full moons sort of play out over the next few days. And I did go into this a little bit more in depth in last week's broadcast, so make sure you check it out. But this full moon was opposite Chiron. So let's talk a little bit about Chiron, because Chiron is a newer addition to astrology. Chiron is an asteroid, comet, depending on how you look at it. And Chiron was only discovered in 1977, so not that long ago. I mean, astrology within the classical boundaries only takes us out to Saturn. That's all we could see. That was all we could know. And true, there is this well-ordered classical system that works. But when you start to get beyond Saturn, you get into things that are more like we are starting to work with archetypes that humanity hasn't really had access to. So we had Uranus gets discovered, I think, in 1781, and then fast forward 1846, I think, and that's when Neptune was discovered, 1931, I think it was, when Pluto was discovered. So these are relatively new, air quotes, new discoveries. So something like 1977, like that's not that much older than I am. So we don't really know what it means. So we're still getting a sense of what this sort of archetype means for us astrologically. But for me, in my work, it's a very important point, because something that, that's the thing about astrology. You can, of course, have thousands of years to work with something and understand something intellectually, but astrology is energy. And hopefully, if I'm right, there's this, you open yourself to this energy, and you can start to see it. You can start to understand it and take it into and be able to give language to what this means. So my own understanding of Chiron is both how I've been told by my spirit guides, but also how I see it show up in other people's charts in my client sessions. So for me, and I say this just to distinguish things, Chiron is often referred to as a wound, or a wound that never heals. That is something that kind of gets me on my soapbox, because this idea that there's a place in your chart that doesn't heal really bothers me. I mean, not just, intellectually or like spiritually, but that there's this kind of like, oh, here's this thing that's, you can't do anything about it, too bad. Chiron is a pain point. Yes, it is someplace that in your astrology chart, there's pain, there's suffering. And you're thinking, oh my, why would I have pain and suffering in my astrology chart? Well, here's the thing. You are a human being, hopefully. You are a human being, and you have experienced pain and suffering in your life. Chiron also connects us to a collective experience. There is both an individual and collective level when it comes to Chiron. So it's not just my pain. It's not just your pain. It's the collective pain of humanity. So we all know what it feels like to feel disempowered, or to lose hope, or to not feel like our voice is being heard, or not think that we have self-worth. That is something that is not unique to you or me, you know what I mean? Like, no, we didn't invent that. That is something that is sort of woven into the fabric of humanity, and we sort of connect to it. And you're thinking, well, why would I want to connect to this? Well, there's a work that we all have to do, both personally and collectively, to alleviate the suffering, to undo it, almost like undoing a knot. The more that we undo ourselves from this energy, the more that we sort of free up space in our lives. But here's the sort of catch. You can't do it just for your own benefit. There is something with Chiron that really says that in order to loosen the pain and loosen the suffering, we have to be able to step out of the ego individual level. Now, how I'm talking about Chiron is not how I talk about normal planets. I mean, normal as in the planets that take us out to Saturn. Like, we are now in a space that's not your normal space. When you start to think about yourself as part of something greater, we're sort of now stepping out of the classical boundaries of astrology. We're now connecting to energy. We're now connecting to the soul. And this is, one of the reasons why I did a webinar, I guess at the end of 2019, called Chiron Healing the Soul, because I believe that in you is this pain point, in your astrology is this pain point. And I bring this up because it's being activated this week, this sort of button that gets pressed all the time. But mostly this is a button that exists on a subconscious level. You don't really realize that it's always playing in the background until either it really is in your face, Or you take a moment to realize, oh, right, when somebody questions my value, it hits something deep. Or if somebody talks over me, or if somebody denies my voice, or if I don't feel like I have a home or a family, like it hits something really deep. Well, that's your Chiron speaking. And then maybe, especially in some people's astrologies, Chiron's prominent. And it talks about a life where you take what has made you suffer the most and you take it out there and you help other people with it. And there is a sort of an inspirational story that can happen with Chiron. It's the person that maybe lost their legs in an accident, and they have Chiron in Aries, and then they now inspire other people to move their bodies, to use prosthetics, to run a marathon, even without legs. So it's like this sort of loop that happens. It's like, and I'm saying this for each and every one of you, what is making you suffer the most right now? Do you sort of get caught in that feeling that it's just your suffering alone? Or can you look out and see how it's part of a greater suffering? Do you see how maybe you can take some of the deepest things that you've experienced in this life and use it to help other people? Chiron's glyph, meaning its symbol in astrology, when you look at an astrology chart and you're trying to find Chiron, you have to look for the symbol of a key. So this tells us that when we start to transcend our Chiron story, transcend our suffering, these sort of wounds, these wounds that maybe we think will never heal, that we then open up to something greater, and then Chiron unlocks our chart. And that's when we step into a higher dimension of our lives. We no longer sort of narrowed by some pain story. Trust me, we all have it. It's what makes you human. But this week, especially with this full moon, and it's sort of touching on this Chiron. Right now, Chiron is in Aries. It's been in Aries since 2018, 2019. So Chiron, if Chiron is a pain point, or if Chiron is a knot of suffering in the fabric of humanity, then the knot right now is in the sign of bravery and courage. If you were born between 1968 and 1977, maybe the beginning of 78, I'm not sure about that, 77. You have Chiron in Aries. So Chiron in Aries, like if you were born with that, then maybe bravery and courage hits a deep pain point. Maybe there have been times where you have needed to have bravery and courage, but you didn't. Maybe you needed to stand up for yourself and something happened, or maybe even in childhood, the parent was angry, or there was an angry situation in the household, and you learned that to stand up for yourself or to be in your anger causes a lot of suffering. So this is a week where you're really feeling this deep psychic material. For the rest of us that aren't born with Chiron and Aries, Chiron is in a very particular part of your chart right now. And that's where there is this very quiet story that's going on, but one that has been hitting a nerve for a couple of years, and maybe even longer. We'll go through each of the signs shortly and talk about where Chiron is showing up to you and where maybe this full moon brought in this dynamic. Most people on this call, you probably have Chiron in Aries. Maybe you have Chiron in Pisces if you're born before 1968. Maybe some of you have Chiron in Aquarius. That would be much older. But, for the most part, most of you all listening, Chiron Aries, Chiron Taurus, suffering is self-worth, it's value, it's money, it's your body, it's your relationship with your body. Chiron in Gemini, suffering is around your voice, people hearing you, people maybe questioning your intelligence or your ability to think or to choose. Chiron in Cancer. Now the pain and suffering is around family, it's around home, it's around feeling safe, stable, and secure. Maybe you don't feel like people love you, or you don't have enough love. So it's a very deep pain point. But maybe a couple of you have Chiron and Leo. For that, it's about the self and self-expression and individuality. So that's Chiron in a nutshell. I did put some links in the show notes if you want to read more about Chiron. I was doing some channeling a few years ago. Maybe I'll pick that up again. It was just sort of this kind of thing that was calling to me at the time. But I did get this sort of download about Chiron, and that for me is sort of the fundamentals of how I personally understand Chiron. So maybe you all feel very differently, but every time I work with it with my clients, it really presents itself. And it's really, for me, about leading people into the higher potential of somebody's life, because I don't think we were born here on this planet not to succeed. There is a path. We just have to find it. Anyway, kind of getting on my soapbox a little bit. But this week we also have Mercury conjunct Neptune. Actually today, May 29th, Mercury is in Pisces. Right now it'll be in Pisces for the rest of the week. It'll change, as I said earlier, on April 3rd. Mercury is the voice, it's the mind, it's how we think, it's how we learn, it's how we analyze. Well, it's conjunct Neptune. I actually have Mercury exactly conjunct Neptune, so I live it every day. It takes the mind and it sort of runs it through this non-linear filter for a really good way in which this, I know my Mercury Neptune's kicking in, a really good way in which this kicks in is it's a very intuitive placement for people. Neptune, it dissolves the boundaries between this world and the next. So you have the planet of voice and communication on this planet that just dissolves the boundaries between this world and the next. You can imagine that it really opens things up. People that are able to channel, people who are able to be mediums. It's also the placement of creative writers, poets, artists, musicians, people who use their voice in very Neptunian ways, I guess for better or for worse. I think that when you get into a sign like Pisces, even with Neptune and Pisces, even though I use traditional rulers, there is an element of transmission. So the way that I see our time together, even though there's a factual information level of things, but it's also meant to be transmission, because that truly is what Pisces is. On one level, it takes the wisdom of Sagittarius, its sibling sign, and it transmits it. Well, side note. So if you're feeling extra sensitive, extra psychic, feeling like your pain points are being hit today, then, well, that's Chiron, that's Mercury and Neptune. As we go later into this week, it's more like we have a few sextiles that are happening. I'm not going to go too much into them because they're like, sextiles are like really quiet energy. They're like the energy of Venus. And Venus, I tell people like sextiles are like you go to sleep and somebody's kind of done the turn down, they put a little chocolate on your pillow. It's those nice little easy touches that allow things to flow. So we have a few sextiles this week. So we got some Venusian energy at our disposal, sort of the things that are maybe aren't more stuck. Oh, speaking of which, the boat in the Suez is not stuck anymore. I'm sure you all have been paying attention to the news. We had a boat run aground in the Suez Canal, which held up world trade. I think I forget the percentage, but it made me think about Saturn in Aquarius and how our time with Saturn Aquarius right now is about understanding systems and networks, including trade, including how our food and goods and services get distributed. And we just saw how one ship could completely, turn the system upside down. So maybe the sextile energy was helping the boat get unstuck. Anyway, side note. As we get into the end of the week, Mercury goes into Aries. So as I was saying earlier, Mercury was in Pisces, conjunct Neptune on Monday, March 29th. And then when it goes into Aries on April 3rd, it changes elements. So astrology is all about elements, understanding how the elements work to support each other or not. And I think I wrote about this on my Instagram. I think elements are really undervalued in astrology. Like elements are how things run. Rulerships and elements. If you want to understand astrology, it's called triplicity, understand that there are 4 elements in astrology, and they are like the pillars of how things get created. Anyway, so right now we're in Aries season. Aries is not only the first sign of the zodiac, it is also about new beginnings. It's about fire. Aries is the first fire sign. So it's that raw initiative, it's action, it's sort of that spark that, you know, when you strike a match and you just get that first flare. That's Aries. It's also, you know, the first buds of life after spring. But we're going to have a bunch of planets in Aries, and then we have Mars in Gemini, which is an air sign. And then we have Saturn also in Aquarius, which is an air sign. So apart from, I think, Neptune and Pisces, Pluto and Capricorn, Uranus and Taurus, which are outer planets, they don't rule anything, everything is going to be air and fire starting this weekend. So what happens when you add air to fire? Things get hot. Things get bigger. So there might be something in the astrology later this week where we feel like we're really moving, because Mercury sort of gets out of Pisces, which, to be fair, is a little bit of a sluggish place for Mercury. It's going to go into Aries, and then it's going to kind of take that energy of Mars and Gemini and like switch it on. So maybe you're traveling this weekend. I know it's holiday weekend for a lot of people. You know, Easter is on Sunday, April 4th. You know, maybe you're moving, maybe you're going, maybe you're moving in your home, but there's this sort of restless quality that's going to get amped up as we go into the weekend and into next week. Do keep in mind that Mercury in Aries is very impulsive. It sort of shoots its mouth off, for better, for worse. So if there's a situation where you need to kind of keep things even keel, not shoot your mouth off, well, you know, just giving you fair warning. Mercury in Aries is also generally very quick. Quick thoughts, quick movements, quick ideas, and maybe we're going to have a lot of big ideas, especially supported by Saturn and big idea Aquarius. So, you know, later this week, we're just going to have a shift in the astrological weather. It's going to start to be less watery because, you know, we have Mercury in Pisces, and then it's going to go into the fire of Aries. So let's just quickly go. Somebody saying think about traveling, but I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you might want to travel. It's just I think a lot of people are going to be doing it, and there's going to be a lot of movement. So we'll just see how that goes. So let's just quickly go through the signs so you can, you know, going back to what I was saying about Chiron, understand where this energy is manifesting for you. So Aries, well, Chiron is in Aries. It'll be in Aries for a few more years. You, on some level, maybe it's not so obvious because Chiron is not always super obvious. You're feeling some sort of story around courage and bravery over the last couple of years. How do you be you? But I mean that on a deeper level. How do you move forward? How do you stand up for what you need to do? Or I would say convictions, but that's kind of more Jupiter. How do you take the steps that are necessary that you need to take in this life? And, you know, we all do it. You know, maybe we have a lot of excuses. Maybe the past gets in the way. Maybe the past scar tissue gets in the way. But you're sort of in this longer framework of time, Aries, where, you know, maybe it was kind of a different story a couple of years ago, but now Chiron's there, and Chiron is really sort of pushing you to examine where you sort of stop. You know, Aries is all about bravery and courage. I mean, true, there's two sides to every zodiac sign, but, you know, maybe you're really feeling where you're not taking the action where you need to. I mean, when we're talking about Chiron, it's a little bit more emotional, it's a little bit more spiritual, it's a little bit more subtle. So it's going to feel different for everybody. Certainly it will feel different for every sign. But maybe you are sort of on a deeper level, Aries, feeling this energy. And of course, you know, this energy did get activated with this full moon. So it's bringing up something about relationships, partnerships, and other people. Taurus. So this is a very quiet place for Chiron to be because Aries is your last sign. It's your 12th sign. So Chiron is showing up in what I affectionately call the God room in your astrology house. It's the place in your astrology house where you have to reconnect to source. Now, for some people, that's completely cut off, or it's a very deeper existential area, but you're trying to make sense of meaning of your life, and maybe it's bringing up a lot of deep, repressed, and buried anger. And if you're thinking, wow, why am I angry? Where is this anger coming from? It's because Chiron is poking at your invisible, your subconscious pain points and your blind spots. And it's been doing this for the past couple of years. So how do you sit with yourself right now, Taurus? I mean, Taurus, we've talked about this in other videos, where you're in a bigger period of time where you are reinventing yourself. Well, if you're reinventing yourself, what's sort of the material, the psychic material, the spiritual material that's in the way? So this Aries, Chiron and Aries might be bringing up a lot of existential feelings, existential anger, and maybe you're not angry at somebody or angry at yourself. You're angry at source. Why am I here? Why do I always get let down? Like, why am I, all the different things that show up for you, Taurus. But this is an energy for you to really kind of feel into these deeper pain points, these sort of invisible wounds that you carry, and to really go in your unconscious, because it's in your unconscious that you are going to unlock something. How do you know what's in your unconscious? You have to sort of like feel into the in-betweens of things. That doesn't quite make sense. Unconsciousness is when there's things that we don't even realize is there. But when we start to shift our awareness, we can see the trail. You can see how the unconsciousness is showing up in different places in our life. Why? Because we choose certain things. We just do things on autopilot. But why? That's a bigger question. And that's where maybe there are things that you don't even see about yourself that are motivating you to do certain things. And maybe, Chiron Aries, it's a deep, deep existential wound or existential pain. Gemini, Chiron is showing up in your sign of friends and community. So the past couple of years, it's been about examining how you connect with people on a deeper level. When Chiron is in this part of the chart, maybe you feel separate. Maybe you feel that you don't have friends, or there's some sort of pain point that's being worked through with a friend or with friendship in general. This is an area that's about community, but you're sort of needing to understand where you fit in the whole, because yes, this is about friendship, yes, this is about community, but ultimately this part of your chart is about the collective whole. And remember, I was saying that with Chiron, there is both this personal level, but there's also this collective level. So how do you start to realize that what you're feeling is actually part of something bigger, and that it is a very powerful and dare I say radical thing to do, to heal yourself as an offering to others or an offering to humanity. And maybe that's, maybe some of the dots are getting connected for you. But Chiron's going to meet us where we're at. And this is sort of true with everybody. For some of us, Chiron's on a very unconscious level. I'm still talking about friendships for Gemini, and you're like, oh, wait, hang on, there's something there. Let me examine that. So this is, for everybody, this is sort of your personal work, is to examine where this might be showing up. And maybe it's not as obvious as first, because Chiron's not obvious. I was asked, a little side note, I was asked if Chiron can be a physical wound, and more often that it's not. But I know from a personal experience that Chiron can show up when there is a physical wounding, but that physical wound is a manifestation of something very deep. Cancer. So Chiron is in the part of your chart that talks about your career. So you now, well, not now, but there's sort of this larger story, because it is Aries season for you. There's something happening in your professional life. It's not as mundane, simple level of like, yes, I'm going to go get a job, Aries new moon next week, or what are my goals and ambitions and the role that I want to play in the world. Okay, well, Chiron exists on a different level. So Cancer, if you're sort of questioning what do you want to do when you grow up, or what's the next step in your professional life, or what's your place in the world on a kind of more of a different level than how it is showing up for Gemini, what's in your way? Are you in your way? Do you need to have more courage and bravery to stand up for yourself in the world, to stand up for yourself in your job, in your career? Maybe this is showing up in a way that sort of speaks to the times when you didn't get the career you wanted or were able to go in the direction that you wanted, because I know often a lot of our professional choices are, for better or for worse, molded by our families and our families' expectations of us. So if you are some profession because that's what your family wanted, but here's Chiron and Aries and it's making you feel that sense of that you're not doing maybe what you really want to do in the world. So this, like I said, this is going to show up in a lot of different ways for people. It's touching on very subtle points. I think the most important thing to realize is that there is a work of consciousness with Chiron. It's not about, oh, I'm just going to heal this. It's starting to realize where we're unraveling lots of layers. And I think with also Chiron for you, Cancer, in your career sign, it's like, how do you do Chiron professionally? To do Chiron professionally is to take what has made you suffer the most and offer it back up. So maybe you are, helping somebody in your professional life or a client find the bravery and courage because you, at some point in your life, didn't have that. Again, there's always that personal and collective level with Chiron. Leo. So Chiron is in the part of your chart that talks about faith. Faith, truth, meaning. It's how you see the world. And maybe Chiron has made you lose faith or question faith. And this doesn't mean religious faith, although it can mean faith on a spiritual or religious level. But I mean faith in the world, faith in yourself, faith that everything will work out. I think there is, in general, a natural sunny disposition for Leo, but Chiron has been poking on some sore points for the past couple of years. So what do you believe in, Leo? Are you ready to stand up for your convictions? Are you afraid to talk about what you believe in? Does it make you terrified? So how do you sort of work through these different levels, and maybe your loss of faith or your, needing to find the bravery to stand up for your convictions is something that you then inspire other people with, because there is a part of this area of your personal astrology chart that does talk about inspiration and needing to inspire others and to go out there in the world and to believe in what you believe in. Of course, convictions and faith, there's another side to that. So, it's like knowing that what you believe in is not going to hurt others or make people suffer, of course. Virgo. So now we're in a part of the chart that talks about your deepest emotions, your psyche, your past, your traumas. So with Chiron and Aries, the pain point is psychological. The pain point is, do I feel safe? Do I feel safe in life? Can I be here? Am I supported? Maybe you're having to do a lot of deep psychological work over the past couple of years. Again, Chiron works on a very, it meets us on the level that we're at. So if we're ready to just dive in and tear everything apart and get to the heart of why we're feeling a certain way, whether it's this life or another life, then Chiron will meet you there. But if you're like walking into this room and you're like terrified to really face a lot of stuff, that's where Chiron's going to meet you. But again, always remember that Chiron is the symbol of a key. You cannot have the healing until you are ready to transcend your personal story of pain and suffering. You cannot make pain and suffering part of your name, like your identity. I know a lot of us have had really terrible things happen to us, and it, in many cases, shapes our identity and sometimes is our identity. So Virgo, for you, it's like what happened in the past, even if it's absolutely terrible, it's not you. It's not part of your identity. And so how do you let that go? How do you transform it? How do you release it? But do that, the work that you do, Virgo, you're doing it for all of humanity. Libra. So Chiron is in the part of your chart that's talking about relationships. So the pain point is now about how you connect to other people. So Chiron is really touching on these deeper stories about, whether somebody showed up for you or didn't show up for you, broke your heart. Can you rely on other people? Can you trust other people? Again, Chiron will meet you where you're at, but there is some deeper story that has to happen about you and other people. So if there's a story, and this is again going to be different for every Libra, there's a story about how relationships for you completely lose yourself. Well, then how do you, in your partnership, or even outside of sorry, my buzz is going off, even outside of a partnership, how do you start to, get my thought back, how do you start to unwind these old stories? So these old stories are about, how you connected to people, how you interacted with people. This is really about socialization as well. It's not just about romantic relationship. It's about you and other people. So if you're afraid to connect to people, then how do you push back through that? Because Chiron in Aries does want you to have courage and bravery, and maybe connecting to people, trusting people, being in a healthy relationship is the most dynamic, courageous, scary, terrifying thing that you can do right now, Libra. But again, even though you are the sign of relationship, doesn't mean that there isn't something that you're trying to work through on a deeper level. So again, I say this, Chiron is going to show up at the level that you are at. And maybe Chiron is completely in your blind spot. Maybe you are shaking your head and you are saying, yes, I understand. I see this in my life. Well, then that's where Chiron's going to meet you. But there is something that has to be healed, something that has to be released. And maybe the story is that you thought you would never have a relationship, but your courage and bravery to get out there and to meet people and open yourself up inspires other people. That's how Chiron works. Scorpio. Chiron is in the part of your chart that talks about health and wellness. How do you take care of your body? How do you show up in day-to-day life, your projects, your work? This part of the chart, it's a very nuts and bolts part of your astrology, Scorpio. For you, maybe there is a deeper pain point in actually being here. And I mean being here in the world. So how do you feel grounded? How do you sort of work past those pain points, those sufferings that make you not want to be here in reality? Maybe Chiron is picking at the scars of your relationship with your body, your relationship with your health, but this is a very subtle influence. So try to see where it's showing up for you, Scorpio. And it could very well be that there's a pain point around work. Scorpios are notorious workaholics. So where is this coming from? Like, does it need to be healed? To be fair, does it need to be put back into balance? So really look at what health means to you. And since Chiron does work on a multidimensional level, healing isn't just physical. And Chiron doesn't just, the wound isn't just physical. Chiron also talks about how the pain and suffering could be emotional. It could be the past. It could be a past life, even. So there's all these different layers, but not to overwhelm you, Scorpio, but is to understand how you have to really find bravery and courage right now and offer it back in your day-to-day life, your everyday life, in a way that might be different than other signs. Sagittarius. So this part of your chart, Chiron is touching on the self, individuality. It's talking about talent and creativity and what makes you, you. So now the pain point, the wound, the knot that you are undoing is about what prevents you from being you? And I mean you fully. This is a little bit of an existential point, because when you get into this part of the chart, it's the self, but it's not the self on a very instinctual, rudimentary level. It's the level of self that's about how do you, what's the essence of who you are? We are spirits in a human bodies. Leo is before Virgo, 5th house before 6th house, spirit in a human body. Anyway, so fire before earth. So how do you open up the container, so to speak, of your life, and the container of you, for you to actually exist in your life, to express yourself, to inspire others, to really find the spark of the divine within and let it be bigger, let it be brighter. So this is, like I said, it's a little bit more of an existential point for you, Sagittarius, because, maybe the courage and bravery is just to simply be you, or to be creative, or to express who you are. And maybe that brings up a lot of complicated feelings and emotions. Capricorn. So Chiron's in the part of your chart that talks about home and family. It's the roots and the foundation of your astrology chart. And when Chiron shows up in this part of your chart, there's a very deep pain around family. Can be. Again, as I said this with other signs, Chiron sort of shows up on different levels for different people. But there's a lot of different layers with Chiron, and it's sort of this realization, Capricorn, that maybe there's something on a family and even an ancestral level that, like, maybe, if you're from another country, for example, or your family's from another country, and you see this, even people who, are 2-3 generations out, they're still carrying some of the pain and suffering of what made their family members leave their home country. So what are you still carrying on an ancestral level? Do you feel like you're not safe, that you cannot be here or be rooted, be grounded? Do you feel that you don't have family, or that there's a lot of complicated emotions and feelings coming up right now with family? Who is family? I think Chiron also says to us on a deeper level that family is not always the people that we are blood related to. In the myth of Chiron was a Greek centaur, half human, half horse, who was the product of either rape, depending on the myth, or the product of an affair. And Chiron was left on Mount Pelion, basically to die, because he was so grotesque. And his mother left him to die, but I think it was Apollo heard the cries of Chiron. And so even though this is a Greek myth, even though this is a story, it's an archetype, meaning it's a story about what happens when somebody is different, what makes people suffer, what makes them feel abandoned. And I think this idea of feeling rejected by the family, or feeling separate from the family, or really searching for the people who will be family, might be showing up for you, Capricorn. But it's a very deep emotional feeling right now, and maybe you're feeling a lot of mixed emotions this week. Aquarius. So this is the part of your chart that talks about voice and communication. The pain and suffering is now about how you speak. Are people hearing you? Do people talk over you? Are you afraid to speak up? Is there a past story with how you use your voice? Because Chiron can show us where things are very blocked or narrow. And so there's a story of needing to really open up your voice. And you can do this, of course, in a lot of different ways, but it's going to take courage and bravery. Maybe the most brave and courageous thing you can do right now, Aquarius, is stand on stage and say something. Maybe that terrifies the pants out of you. Maybe the most terrifying thing you can do to get your voice out there is to sit on camera every day at 6 p.m. Eastern and talk astrology to absolute strangers in the world. But nevertheless, we do these things because it's part of a greater medicine. So how do you show people that you can speak, that you can share your voice, that you are brave and courageous enough to do these things? Maybe Chiron is showing you where you have an old story about what you think, like, are you intelligent? Or maybe you were told when you were younger that you weren't intelligent, or maybe there was a learning disability, and you are realizing that maybe that's not quite truth, or maybe how you lived it when you were younger is not really your capacity to live it now. Again, you are undoing the knot. You are opening up space because, again, when you find your voice, you help others find their voice. Pisces. So now we're at the end of the zodiac, and Pisces, Chiron for you is in your second sign. Second sign is about money, stability, and security. So the pain point is, do I have enough? Am I safe? Can I pay the bills? Will I have enough next month? Make my rent? Will, this deeper story about value. People challenging your value right now is going to hit a button this week. Maybe you're like, this is what I'm worth. This is my fee, or this is what I want my salary to be, or, maybe you're selling something and you're like, oh, well, maybe, I don't, I'm gonna lowball myself. So Chiron in Aries is saying, don't lowball yourself, because when you lowball yourself, you are lowballing, like putting the energy out there in the world, and you're making it okay for people to lowball themselves. When you set energetic boundaries on what your value and worth is, believe it or not, it opens up space energetically. So sometimes the most scariest thing that you can do is tell people, oh yes, what I do costs this much money. Oh my God, what if they say no? And if they say no, does that mean that I'm not worth anything? Well, here, let me make this $5, because if $5 or $1 or whatever your local currency is, then, they can't say no. And then they want me. Well, that's a trap, because what happens is you get people who only see your value as this much as opposed to this much. And it's not about money. It's about the energy behind money and about what that sort of level of economy is in your life. And if it's all about like, oh, I'm not worth this much, or I can't spend this money. To be fair, I'm a very practical person, so I'm not telling you to spend money that you don't have. But I remember there's this kind of being raised, my mom was probably listening, being raised that like you can't spend money on certain things. It's frivolous, or it's, we don't order the lobster, we order the cheapest thing on the menu. Hi, Mom. So, I'm not saying always order the lobster, but sometimes just to be like, like I'm worth this, opens up the energy, or whatever analogy is applicable to you, Pisces. How do you start to tell the universe, tell others, tell your life what you're worth and what you need without compromise, what you need in order to feel safe and secure in life and to make sure that your needs are taken care of? So that's Chiron in the 12 signs right now, where Chiron is in Aries this week. Well, not just this week, it's going to be there for a few more years. But again, just to recap, this is, Chiron speaks to a deeper, multifaceted, multidimensional level. It's not just physical, it's emotional, it's psychic, it's, in some cases, it's past lives. I mean, that level is a bit far out there, but we have to see how maybe the pain and suffering that we're feeling right now doesn't have roots in the now. It comes from someplace else. It might be ancestral pain, or it might be another lifetime. So that's something for you all to contemplate this week as we come off the Libra full moon. We navigate these energies of Chiron and Aries. And then, like I said, later this week on April 3rd, Mercury shows up in Aries, and we sort of get this big push later this week, and we're going to see a big shift in the energies, or what I think will be a big shift in the energies. So thank you all for joining me for another live look at the astrology. Went a little deep into Chiron territory this week, but it's one of those planets that means a lot to me, and I use it a lot. in my work. To that point, you can follow me online at empoweringastrology.com. Follow me on Facebook. You can, of course, if you're watching this on Facebook Live. Instagram, I'm on also on Instagram, IGTV. If you're watching this on the replay, YouTube, Spotify, you can listen to this as an audio recording. And yeah, that's it for this week. So thank you so much for joining me. I will see you all next week. Take care. Really do, your healing work this week as much as you can, or do your self-reflection with your Chiron. And I will see you all next week. Bye.